Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey back in time to an age that may seem far removed from our modern lives. Close your eyes and imagine it. The golden rays of a setting sun cast long shadows across the towering pyramids, their majestic structures rising from the vast desert. The Nile stretches like a lifeline through the land, its waters glimmering under the evening sky. This is ancient Egypt, a civilization of splendor, mystery, and awe-inspiring monuments. But behind the glittering gold of the pharaohs and the iconic pyramids lies a harsher reality, one that was filled with struggle, sacrifice, and unyielding hardship for the people who lived there. You've probably heard the stories. Ancient Egypt is often portrayed as a land of royalty, of kings and queens whose names live on through the ages. But the truth is that life in ancient Egypt was not just one of opulence and glory. For the majority of Egyptians, it was a life of hard labor, constant effort, and vulnerability to the whims of nature. The grandeur of the monuments, the majestic tombs, and the golden treasures we admire today were built on the backs of ordinary people who endured grueling physical work in the unforgiving desert sun, who sacrificed their time, health, and lives for the dream of Egypt. Imagine, if you will, that you are one of those people. You are not a pharaoh reclining on a luxurious throne, nor are you an artist whose name will be etched into history for creating beautiful works of art. No, you are one of the nameless laborers, the workers who toil day after day, year after year. Your job is to build the very monuments that will one day be the stuff of legend. But for you, it's a daily grind. You wake up before the sun rises, your body already aching from the weight of yesterday's labor. The air is thick and hot as the day stretches on. There's no escaping the heat, no shelter from the relentless sun that beats down upon the land. You work the fields, haul heavy stones, and carry out the endless tasks assigned to you by the pharaoh's overseers. The pharaohs may live in palaces, surrounded by wealth and luxury, but you live in a small, modest home made of mud bricks. Your food is simple: bread, beer, onions, and a few vegetables. Meat is a rare treat, something only the wealthy get to enjoy on a regular basis. You wear simple linen garments that offer little protection from the sun, and as the day stretches on, you begin to feel the toll that the work is taking on your body. Your hands are calloused, your back aches from bending over in the fields, and your legs are sore from walking the long miles to the work site each day. The work is grueling, and the conditions are harsh. You have no choice but to keep going. There's no room for weakness in your world. If you don't work, there's no food, no shelter, and no hope. You are part of the machine that keeps Egypt moving, and though your name will never be remembered, your contributions are vital to the success of this civilization. It's easy to romanticize ancient Egypt when we look at the grand monuments and the golden treasures that the pharaohs left behind. But what we often forget is that these marvels came at a great cost, a cost that was paid by the workers, the peasants, the laborers, who spent their lives in service of a greater purpose that they would never see fully realized. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always interesting to see where this journey takes us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Life in ancient Egypt was far from glamorous for most people, and the daily struggle for survival was an ever-present reality. The pharaohs, the nobles, the scribes, all of them lived lives of privilege and comfort. But for the majority of Egyptians, life was a constant fight against the elements, the state, and sometimes even death itself. But there was something undeniably beautiful in that struggle. Through the sweat, the blood, the tears, they built a civilization that still captivates the world today. As you lie here, imagining yourself as one of those workers, you realize that your life is not your own. You live and work for something greater than yourself, a civilization that will one day be immortalized. The pyramids will rise, the temples will stand, and the pharaohs will be remembered forever. But you, like so many others, will be forgotten. Your name won't be carved into the stone, but your effort, your sacrifice, your labor will have made those monuments possible. And in that, there is a certain pride. You know that despite everything, you are part of something that will last forever. The sound of the Nile's waters flowing gently in the distance soothes your mind as you drift into a momentary rest. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. A new day, a new set of challenges, a new round of labor. But for now, the work is done. The sun is setting, and as the sky fades into twilight, you can take a brief moment to breathe and reflect. Tomorrow, you will wake up again, and the cycle will continue. But tonight, you are at peace. For tonight, you rest. And in that rest, you are a small part of the greater whole that is ancient Egypt. The river Nile, which flows silently under the moonlight, still weaves its way through the landscape today. But imagine living in ancient Egypt, when every flood carried with it both a promise of prosperity and a fear of ruin. The life of every farmer, artisan, and soldier hung in the balance of the river's annual cycles, a reality that dictated the rhythms of the entire society. It wasn't just about crops or harvests. It was about survival. For centuries, the Egyptian people would pour their sweat and labor into fields, monuments, and cities built on the shifting whims of the mighty Nile. One year, it would bless them with rich, black silt, fertile enough to nourish entire generations. The next, it might fail them, leaving them starving, with fields as dry as the desert they bordered. But despite the overwhelming power of the river, life in Egypt was about more than just coping with nature's unpredictability. It was also about the intricate and complex web of social hierarchies and systems of control that shaped every aspect of existence. The world of ancient Egypt was divided sharply, with power concentrated at the very top in the hands of the pharaoh and his elite, and an oppressed mass of peasants, slaves, and laborers toiling for their survival. From the moment a child was born, their place in the social structure was already determined. The rich and the poor were worlds apart, with the elite enjoying lives of indulgence, while the lower classes faced a daily struggle for mere survival. Let's look at the workers, those who built Egypt's monuments, who turned the dreams of pharaohs into stone. It's easy to imagine the grandeur of the Great Pyramids, the most famous testament to Egypt's architectural genius. rising high into the desert sky. But as awe-inspiring as these colossal structures are, they were made possible only through immense human suffering. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the largest of them all, was constructed over a period of 20 years and required an estimated 20,000 to 40,000 workers. Imagine that scale. Those workers weren't just pushing blocks. They were working in the heat of the desert sun, hauling massive stones with little more than simple tools. The physical toll on their bodies was devastating. Workers lived in camps near the pyramids, and their remains tell the story of the harsh conditions they faced. Excavations of these workers' cemeteries reveal evidence of arthritis, herniated discs, and broken bones, clear signs of the years of labor they endured. Some died from exhaustion or accidents on the job, and their bodies were hastily buried in shallow graves, discarded like tools no longer needed. Even the so-called lucky workers, those who were not slaves but still conscripted by the state, had little choice. They worked from dawn to dusk, their lives controlled by the whims of the pharaoh and the demands of the state. You probably won't be surprised to learn that for many of these workers, life expectancy was shockingly short. The bones of those who died on the job show evidence of a life spent in constant pain, from repetitive stress injuries to diseases caused by unsanitary conditions. The very act of building the pyramids became a death sentence for countless laborers. And while the pharaohs enjoyed their opulent lives in the shadow of these massive structures, the laborers who built them were left to suffer. It's staggering to think that such monumental achievements were built at such an immense cost in human lives. Now, while many of the workers were at least afforded the luxury of living in these camps, many others found themselves trapped in a more permanent, dehumanizing servitude. Slaves, often captured in military campaigns or born into bondage, faced the harshest conditions of all. Unlike the peasants who could hope for a slightly better life, slaves were the property of their masters, their lives expendable. They were sent to labor in the royal quarries, mines, and fields, and their existence was one of constant fear and exhaustion. Let's talk about the forced labor in the mines. Picture yourself under the scorching sun, working in the gold mines of Bir Fawahir. This is one of the most infamous sites of forced labor in ancient Egypt. The conditions were nightmarish. Slaves in these mines worked in narrow tunnels, exposed to intense heat and the constant risk of cave-ins. Their bodies, already weakened from malnutrition, would break down quickly in this environment. Malaria, tuberculosis, and other diseases were rampant, but the most terrifying of all was the silicosis, lung disease caused by inhaling rock dust. Slaves who worked in the mines often died young, their bodies left to rot in the unforgiving desert. The rare accounts from the time describe the brutal physical toll, the agony of workers who were forced to mine gold to fill the coffers of their rulers. For these slaves, death was often a welcome escape from the hellish existence they endured. It's easy to romanticize ancient Egypt, to imagine a society of opulence and grandeur. But for the vast majority of its inhabitants, the reality was much harsher. They were trapped in a system that didn't just exploit them, it consumed them. From the Nile to the pyramids, from the royal court to the fields, every aspect of Egyptian life was steeped in hardship. Whether you were a lowly laborer, a farmer toiling under the sun, or a slave shackled to the whims of the pharaoh, the story of ancient Egypt was one of exploitation. But still, the people endured. Despite the relentless suffering, they found ways to make meaning in their lives. They worked hard to feed their families, to build monuments that would outlast their lifetimes, and to honor their gods and their kings. They fought wars, they built temples, they created art, and they prayed for a better life in the afterlife. And even though their lives were shaped by brutal forces beyond their control, they managed to leave a legacy that endures to this day. So as you lay there tonight, thinking about your life, your comforts, your worries, remember the stories of those who built Egypt's greatness. Their sacrifices paved the way for the wonders that still captivate the world. In many ways, they were just like us, trying to make sense of a world that often seemed against them, trying to build something that would outlast their struggles. And they did. As you imagine the endless stretch of sand and the mighty Nile coursing through it, think about the people who lived and died along its banks. The ancient Egyptians, both noble and common, found themselves caught in a web of fate spun by the gods and their rulers. In a world where nothing seemed certain, the one constant was the overwhelming power of the Nile. But its waters, so essential to life, could also be a bringer of death. Each year, the river would flood, an event that could either nourish the land with fertile silt or drown the hopes of entire communities. This stark dichotomy between life and death was a reality faced by the average Egyptian. Picture the farmers, those whose livelihoods depended on the river's cycles. Their homes, modest mud-brick dwellings, sat precariously close to the water's edge, always at the mercy of the Nile's annual floods. The farmers watched the river rise and fall, hoping for a good flood, one that would blanket the land in a thick layer of rich black soil, perfect for planting wheat, barley, and other crops. But when the Nile failed them, when it didn't flood enough, crops would wither, and famine would take hold. Even more dangerous was the flood's power when it swelled too high. The rising water would flood entire villages, destroy homes, wash away crops, and cause massive loss of life. You can imagine the helplessness that must have gripped these people, watching their fields disappear under murky water, praying for mercy from the gods, but knowing there was nothing they could do. And even though the floodwaters could be destructive, the farmers could never afford to relax. The river's cycles were both a blessing and a curse, and they lived with this knowledge every day. But while the Nile was both a source of life and a threat, it was not the only danger the Egyptians faced. Consider the social structure that shaped their lives. It was one of the most rigid hierarchies in the ancient world, where power, wealth, and privilege were concentrated in the hands of the pharaoh and his court. At the very top was the king, regarded as a god on earth, whose every command was absolute. Below him was the nobility, the priests, and the scribes, the powerful few who lived lives of luxury. And then, far beneath them, were the farmers, the laborers, the peasants, and the slaves, toiling in the fields and on construction sites to keep the economy running. For the majority of Egyptians, life was a daily struggle against poverty and hunger. Farmers were required to give a portion of their crops to the state, leaving them with just enough to feed their families, if they were lucky. During the flood season, when they couldn't work the land, they were conscripted to work on the king's monumental building projects. Can you imagine working for months on end under the scorching sun, hauling massive stones and laboring to build the colossal pyramids, temples, and monuments that would honor the gods? These workers, peasants, farmers, artisans, and slaves, were the true backbone of Egyptian civilization. Yet their lives were marked by hardship, exhaustion, and the constant threat of punishment. The pyramids themselves stand as towering reminders of this brutal reality. You might look at the Great Pyramid of Giza and marvel at its sheer scale, its precision, and the staggering amount of labor that went into its creation. But behind this awe-inspiring monument lies the untold story of the workers who built it. These workers lived in temporary camps near the pyramids, and archaeological excavations of these workers' cemeteries paint a chilling picture of the toll the labor took on their bodies. The skeletal remains found there show clear signs of long-term physical strain, arthritis, spinal deformities, fractures, and broken bones. Many of these workers died on the job, their bodies discarded in hastily dug graves. For them, the pyramids were not symbols of glory, but rather tombs of sacrifice. And what of the slaves who were forced into this labor? Life for them was even worse. Slaves, often captured in military campaigns or born into bondage, had no rights. They were the property of their masters and were treated as expendable. Forced to work in the king's quarries, mines, and fields, they were subjected to the harshest conditions of all. Imagine being trapped in the cycle of endless toil with no hope of ever breaking free. Slaves who worked in the gold mines of Bir Fawahir were particularly unfortunate. The mines were brutal, the work exhausting, and the conditions unbearable. Many slaves perished in the mines, their bodies left to rot in the unforgiving desert heat. This was the reality for so many of Egypt's laborers, lives sacrificed to the whims of their rulers. But despite the cruelty of their situation, the workers and slaves still found ways to make their lives meaningful. They created communities. They cared for their families, and they lived with a sense of resilience that carried them through their daily struggles. The worker villages near the pyramids reveal a glimpse of this. Even in the face of unimaginable hardships, these workers found comfort in each other. They carved messages on limestone, played games, and even made toys for their children. Their lives were marked by suffering, yes, but also by the small joys that made their existence bearable. So, as you drift into sleep tonight, consider the struggles and sacrifices of those who came before you. The ancient Egyptians built one of the most enduring civilizations in history, but they did so at a tremendous cost. The monuments they left behind are a testament to their resilience and their ingenuity. But the true story of ancient Egypt is not just about the pharaohs and their grand monuments. It's about the ordinary people, the ones who toiled, suffered, and persevered through hardship. The towering monuments of Egypt, those magnificent structures that seem to scrape the sky, stand as symbols of the grandeur of this ancient civilization. But let's not forget that these stone giants were built on the backs of those who had no say in their creation. The farmers, laborers, slaves, and conscripted workers who made up the vast majority of Egyptian society were tasked with the seemingly endless job of supporting the pharaoh's monumental ambitions. And, as much as you might marvel at the pyramids today, you have to ask yourself, who paid the price for their creation? The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is an engineering marvel, a vast structure made up of more than 2 million blocks of stone, each weighing over 2 tons. It was constructed over 20 years and required a labor force of tens of thousands. It's easy to look at it and imagine the glory of ancient Egypt, the prosperity and the divine power of the pharaoh. But the reality of the workers who toiled on the pyramid was one of constant hardship. These men and women weren't just laboring on a grand, inspiring project. They were toiling in the heat of the Egyptian sun, hauling massive stones up ramps and building a structure that would eventually entomb the pharaoh, their god king. As you visualize this, think of the laborers, their bodies drenched in sweat, their hands calloused from constant work. They were exposed to the scorching sun for hours, day after day, without relief. The construction sites were filled with the sounds of grunts, ropes being pulled, and stones being dragged across the ground. Injuries were frequent. Workers could fall from scaffolding, get struck by falling stones, or be crushed under the weight of the blocks. Many died from exhaustion, dehydration, or accidents, and their bodies were unceremoniously discarded in the sandy soil. This was a reality faced by those who were called to serve the king. A life measured not in years, but in the toll exacted by labor. But the harshness didn't stop there. There were those who weren't just working for a pharaoh. They were slaves. The institution of slavery in ancient Egypt was widespread, and those who found themselves in bondage faced lives of unimaginable cruelty. Slaves were captured during military campaigns, sold in markets, or forced into servitude because of debt. They were property, nothing more, and were expected to labor in the quarries, the fields, or even the royal palaces, often under the threat of violence. The lives of these slaves were harsh and unforgiving. There was no hope for a better future, only the harshness of the present, the never-ending struggle to survive. The gold mines of Bir Fawahir offer a particularly grim look at this reality. This place, located in the eastern desert, was notorious for the inhumane conditions that the slaves endured. Picture yourself in one of these mines, surrounded by the oppressive heat, the stifling dust, and the claustrophobic tunnels. Slaves would spend long hours digging through the earth, searching for gold to fill the pharaoh's coffers. They had no protection from the elements, no safety measures in place to shield them from the dangers of the mines. Many slaves died in the mines, either from exhaustion, malnutrition, or disease. Their bodies were left in the harsh desert, forgotten by all but the sands. The worst part? These slaves were not only laboring for the pharaoh's grand projects, they were also contributing to the empire's wars. The military campaigns waged by the pharaohs were brutal and unforgiving, and the consequences of these wars were felt by the average Egyptian. Whether it was defending the borders of the empire or expanding its territories, the pharaoh's armies were constantly on the move. But who did the work? The same laborers who built the pyramids, who tilled the soil, who served as slaves to the gods. They marched off to battle, leaving behind their families, their homes, and their livelihoods. They fought to protect a kingdom that often treated them as nothing more than expendable resources. And yet, even though they were fighting for the very survival of the empire, their lives were still considered less valuable than those of the pharaohs and the elite. Let's look at the military campaigns of Thutmose III, one of Egypt's greatest warrior pharaohs. In the 15th century BC, Thutmose III led 17 campaigns, conquering territories in Syria, Palestine, and Nubia. His most famous victory was the Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BC, where his forces faced a massive Canaanite coalition. The battle was brutal, with hundreds of soldiers falling in a single day. But this wasn't just a matter of glory for the pharaoh. It was a matter of life and death for the soldiers who fought. Many of them, you can imagine, were conscripted peasants, forced to march into battle with little more than a spear and the promise of a king's reward. And even if they survived the battle, the aftermath was just as harsh. The soldiers faced the dangers of starvation, disease, and constant warfare. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about surviving. What's more, the spoils of war were not for the common soldier. The captured cities, the treasure, the tribute, all of it went to the pharaoh and his court. The men who fought for these riches would be lucky if they received a fraction of the rewards. Their lives were consumed in service to the king, their bodies broken and discarded in the wake of battle. But perhaps even more unsettling is the fact that the majority of these soldiers, like the workers on the pyramids, never had a choice. They were drafted into the service of the state, pressed into service by their rulers, with no say in the matter. For them, the battle was just another form of labor, a labor that could very well cost them their lives. But despite this grim reality, the ancient Egyptians carried on. Even in the face of such hardship, they persevered. They found ways to make meaning out of their struggle. They built great monuments. They created art. They prayed to their gods. And they lived their lives as best as they could. In the end, the legacy of ancient Egypt is not just about the pharaohs and their grand achievements. It's about the resilience of the people who endured the hardships of life, who faced death, poverty, and oppression, and who still managed to leave behind a civilization that continues to captivate the world. So as you rest your head tonight, think about the Egyptians, both the famous and the forgotten. Think about those who built the pyramids, those who fought in the king's armies, and those who lived in the shadow of the gods. Their stories, often untold, still echo in the sands of time. Their sacrifices, their struggles, and their resilience have left us with a civilization that continues to inspire awe. And perhaps, in some small way, their legacy lives on in us as we face our own challenges and fight our own battles, in whatever form they may take. Imagine standing before the towering structures of ancient Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza rises high above, a monumental testament to the pharaoh's ambition and the labor of thousands of workers. The air is hot, the sun relentless. You can feel the grit of the desert beneath your feet, the dust swirling in the air. And as you look up at the pyramid, you realize that while it seems to defy time itself, it was, in fact, built on a foundation of suffering and sacrifice. The pyramids, those magnificent stone giants, were not just the product of advanced engineering and divine inspiration. They were the result of a rigid, hierarchical society in which the lives of the common people were expendable. Thousands of men, women, and children worked on the construction sites, enduring unimaginable hardships. The work was grueling, the hours long, and the risks were constant. But even as these monumental structures rose, the true cost of their creation was hidden beneath the shining surface. For the vast majority of Egyptians, life was one of constant struggle. The forced labor used to construct the pyramids was not just a matter of conscription, it was a brutal system of control. Farmers, artisans, and even slaves were rounded up to work on the grand projects of the pharaoh. Their labor, often under duress, was the backbone of Egypt's architectural wonders. Picture it: long days spent hauling massive stones, chiseling them into shape, and constructing intricate ramps to lift them higher and higher. This labor was exhausting and dangerous. Accidents were frequent, and injuries often led to death. Workers who dropped from exhaustion or were crushed by falling stones were discarded in shallow graves, their sacrifices barely acknowledged. But it wasn't just the physical toil that wore down the workers. The psychological burden of living under the constant threat of punishment was equally heavy. Egyptian society was built on an intricate web of power, with the pharaoh at the top and the masses at the bottom. The laborers, despite their vital role in the creation of the kingdom's monuments, had little to no rights. They were subject to harsh overseers, whose sole purpose was to ensure that the work was completed, no matter the human cost. In many cases, the laborers were nothing more than a cog in the grand machine of Egyptian society. Their lives were controlled by the whims of the pharaoh and his officials. They had little say in their fate, whether it was being conscripted to build a pyramid or to fight in a war. If they fell ill or were injured on the job, they were discarded as easily as the bricks they carried. And if they were caught trying to escape the hard labor or the oppression of their daily lives, punishment was swift and severe. Slaves who tried to flee were often executed as an example to others. Punishments ranged from cruel beatings to public executions. Even if they survived the brutality, the laborers had no means of improving their station in life. There was no hope for upward mobility, no chance for change. The reality of life for a common laborer in ancient Egypt was stark. A constant cycle of hard work, long hours, and the ever-present threat of punishment. But even within this system of cruelty and oppression, there were moments of respite. In the workers' villages surrounding the pyramid construction sites, there was a sense of community. Families lived together in simple mud brick homes, sharing the little they had. In the evenings, they gathered to eat, to talk, and to find solace in each other's company. Even in the harshest of conditions, the workers managed to carve out a small sense of dignity and humanity. You might wonder then how these workers continued on day after day, building the massive pyramids that still stand as symbols of Egypt's grandeur. The answer lies in their resilience. Despite the constant threat of death, the physical strain of their labor, and the emotional toll of living under constant surveillance, they found a way to endure. Their faith, their connection to each other, and the promise of an afterlife provided the strength to continue. But even in death, these workers were not forgotten. The graves of these laborers, discovered by archaeologists in the workers' cemetery near the pyramids, revealed the humanity that survived in the face of such hardship. These workers, though often nameless and faceless, were buried with care, with small offerings left for their journey into the afterlife. It's a poignant reminder that despite the brutal conditions they faced, the laborers who built the pyramids had families, they had hopes, and they had dreams. Their work was not in vain. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And what about the lives of the pharaohs? Those at the top of Egypt's social pyramid. Their lives were, in many ways, a world apart from those of the workers. The pharaohs, revered as living gods, lived in palaces surrounded by luxury and abundance. They were waited on by servants, protected by guards, and served by a court of nobles and priests. But even for the pharaohs, life was not without its challenges. The pressure to maintain power, to protect the empire, and to fulfill the divine mandate was immense. Even the greatest of pharaohs, like Thutmose III, faced threats from within and from outside their kingdom. The luxury of royal life was often tempered by the harsh realities of war and the constant struggle for power. Thutmose III, one of the most renowned warrior pharaohs, waged relentless military campaigns to expand Egypt's empire. His military conquests brought wealth and glory to Egypt, but they also exacted a heavy toll on the soldiers who fought in his name. These soldiers, many of whom were conscripted peasants, faced unimaginable hardships as they marched across the desert and fought in distant lands. Their lives were filled with danger, and many never returned home. Those who did often came back broken, physically and mentally scarred by the brutality of warfare. The soldiers who fought for Egypt's glory were not the only ones to suffer. The families of these soldiers, left behind while their loved ones went off to battle, also endured hardship. For many, the constant threat of war meant that their lives were marked by fear and uncertainty. The soldiers who survived the battlefields often returned to find their homes in disarray, their crops ruined by the constant demand for labor, and their families struggling to get by. Yet, despite the constant suffering, the Egyptians endured. The workers, the soldiers, the farmers, the laborers, all of them carried on, driven by a sense of faith, duty, and resilience. Their lives may have been short and brutal, but they left behind a legacy that still resonates today. The pyramids, the temples, the art, and the stories of their lives continue to captivate our imaginations, reminding us of the incredible strength of the human spirit. So, as you close your eyes tonight, think of the lives of those who built the wonders of Egypt. Think of the workers who toiled in the heat of the desert, the soldiers who fought on distant battlefields, and the families who lived in the shadows of the pharaohs. Their struggles, their sacrifices, and their resilience are a testament to the human will to survive, to create, and to endure. Now, imagine standing on the banks of the mighty Nile. The river stretches out before you, its waters glistening in the harsh sunlight. It's easy to see why the Egyptians revered the Nile as their lifeblood. Without it, this civilization would never have thrived. It brought water to their fields, provided transport for trade, and nourished the very existence of Egypt. But even as the Nile brought abundance, it also posed an ever-present threat. The river was both a blessing and a curse, shaping the lives of everyone in ancient Egypt, from the pharaohs to the farmers. Each year, the Nile would flood its banks, an event that was both feared and relied upon. The floods were a natural phenomenon that brought fertile silt, essential for agriculture. The Egyptians had a complex relationship with this cycle. On the one hand, the flooding was critical for ensuring a bountiful harvest. On the other hand, it was unpredictable, and a flood that was too high could destroy entire villages, ruin crops, and bring about famine. But a flood too low? That meant a dire shortage of water, with crops withering under the harsh desert sun. Imagine being a farmer during this time, watching nervously as the Nile's waters began to rise. Each year, the people would pray to the gods, hoping the river would rise just enough to nourish their land, but not so much that it would destroy everything. The threat of famine was a constant presence, and many Egyptians lived in fear of it. A bad flood could wipe out the harvest, leaving entire communities starving and destitute. This precarious balance between life and death governed much of the Egyptian experience. In the same way that the Nile brought the life-giving water, it could just as easily bring death. The floods could destroy entire communities, drowning homes, livestock, and people who were unlucky enough to be caught in their path. And when the river receded, it left behind not only fertile soil, but the danger of drought, leaving the farmers scrambling to plant enough crops to feed themselves and their families. Despite this constant threat, the Egyptians managed to survive, adapt, and even thrive. They learned to control the waters using canals, dikes, and other water management techniques to harness the Nile's power. But even with their advanced understanding of the river, the unpredictability of its cycles still had the power to throw them into chaos. The Nile's moods were unpredictable, and the Egyptians were always at the mercy of its whims. The impact of the Nile's flooding extended far beyond the fields. It influenced the very structure of Egyptian society. The pharaohs, at the top of the social hierarchy, were seen as divine figures, the living gods who controlled the land and the people. They were considered the intermediaries between the gods and the people, ensuring the continued favor of the Nile and the gods. In times of good floods, the pharaohs were revered and celebrated. When the river failed to rise or flooded too high, their power and authority were questioned. But even the pharaohs, for all their power and wealth, were not immune to the harsh realities of life. They, too, were subject to the unpredictable nature of the Nile. A pharaoh who could not control the river's cycles was viewed as weak, and their reign could quickly come to an end. The legitimacy of a pharaoh's rule was tied to the success of the flood, and when famine struck, the people's trust in their ruler was shaken. For the common people, life in ancient Egypt was far less glamorous than the images of lavish palaces and opulent tombs we often associate with the civilization. While the pharaohs lived in luxury, the vast majority of Egyptians lived simple, difficult lives. Farmers, craftsmen, and laborers worked tirelessly to meet the demands of the state and the pharaohs. Their homes were small, made of mud brick, and often lacked basic comforts. The peasants were at the mercy of the natural world, and their livelihoods depended on the whims of the Nile. In the face of these challenges, the Egyptians developed a culture deeply intertwined with the river and its cycles. The Nile was not only the physical lifeblood of the land, but also a spiritual and cultural symbol. It was the source of life, but also a reminder of the fragility of existence. The Egyptians built their civilization on the constant tension between life and death, abundance and scarcity, control and chaos. The social hierarchy in Egypt mirrored the structure of the Nile itself. At the top, like the floodwaters of the Nile, were the pharaohs, the living gods. Beneath them were the priests, scribes, and nobles who controlled much of the wealth and power. The peasants, laborers, and slaves were at the bottom, like the muddy waters of the river, essential, but largely invisible. Their lives were shaped by the floodwaters, and their survival depended on their ability to adapt to the changing circumstances. The average Egyptian, like the river, was at the mercy of forces beyond their control. While the pharaohs may have built monumental temples and tombs to commemorate their power, the lives of the workers who built these structures were far more precarious. They toiled in the sun, hauling stones, chiseling bricks, and constructing the great monuments that defined Egypt's grandeur. The workers who built the pyramids and other grand structures were often conscripted to labor for the state, and their lives were dictated by the needs of the pharaohs. The hardships of life in ancient Egypt were not limited to the laborers who worked on the monuments. The social hierarchy ensured that the peasants, too, faced constant struggles. Life was hard, and there was little opportunity for escape. For the majority of Egyptians, survival meant toiling in the fields, paying taxes to the state, and enduring whatever came their way. The rich, like the Nile itself, were often able to weather these challenges, but the poor and powerless were left to struggle. But even in the face of such adversity, the Egyptians found ways to endure. They worked together, relied on their faith, and used their ingenuity to survive. The Egyptian people knew that life was fragile, and that the only certainty was death. But they also knew that the struggle for survival was part of the human experience. They built monuments, created art, and wrote stories that would endure long after their deaths. In the end, their resilience and determination allowed them to create one of the most remarkable civilizations the world has ever known. The Nile may have shaped Egypt, but it was the people who built it. The pharaohs may have commanded armies and constructed monumental temples, but it was the workers who toiled in the fields and on the construction sites who truly brought Egypt to life. As you reflect on the story of ancient Egypt, think not just of the grand structures and the famous rulers, but of the ordinary people who endured, who survived, and who contributed to the civilization's greatness. Imagine standing in the scorching heat under the relentless Egyptian sun, with the Nile River stretching endlessly before you. You're not the pharaoh or a noble scribe, but a simple farmer, laboring under the weight of the land's demands. The very river that brings life to Egypt, the one that nourishes the crops you depend on, is also the source of your constant anxiety. Each year, you watch the river's unpredictable moods with bated breath, knowing that the fate of your family, your fields, and your livelihood rests entirely on it. The Nile, in all its grandeur and importance, shapes everything. If the floods arrive on time, and with just the right amount of water, your fields will flourish. Wheat, barley, and vegetables will grow, and life will continue, at least for another year. But if the flood is too high, it will wash away your crops, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. On the other hand, if the Nile is too low, your fields will dry up, and famine will follow. Imagine the weight of that fear, the helplessness of knowing you are entirely at the mercy of this great river. While the pharaohs sit in their palaces, sheltered from the turmoil of the common people, your life is far from secure. As a farmer, your role is vital to Egypt's economy, but the cost is high. The pharaoh's insatiable need for monumental projects and his never-ending wars strain the people, especially the laborers and peasants who are forced into conscription during the flood season. You're no stranger to hard labor, but when you're taken from your land and forced to work on the grand building projects of the pharaoh, it's a different kind of burden. You must leave your family behind and travel for days to reach the construction sites, where you will work in the blistering heat, moving massive stones and digging canals. Your muscles will ache, your hands will blister, and by the end of the day, you'll be left utterly exhausted. This was the reality for thousands of Egyptians who, like you, worked tirelessly to build the grand structures that have become synonymous with the civilization itself. The Great Pyramids, colossal temples, and towering obelisks were all constructed by the sweat, blood, and bones of the laborers. And yet, as you labor under the hot sun, it's clear that these grand monuments were not built for you or your family. They were built for the pharaohs, the gods, and the afterlife, not for the people who made them a reality. These monuments were more than just impressive feats of engineering. They were symbols of the pharaoh's divine rule and their ability to command the very forces of nature. The massive pyramids, for instance, were designed to ensure the pharaoh's safe passage to the afterlife, where he could continue to rule over Egypt for eternity. These structures were meant to immortalize the ruler, to guarantee that his name and power would endure long after his death. But while the pharaohs and their elites reveled in their immortalized legacy, the laborers who constructed these marvels were forgotten, their names lost to history. The disparity between the ruling class and the common people was stark. While the rich lived in palaces and enjoyed feasts, the majority of Egyptians struggled to make ends meet. Even the most basic comforts were out of reach for many. The average Egyptian had little to call their own, and most lived in small, cramped houses made of mud brick. The air was thick with dust, and the sun beat down mercilessly. Inside, there was no reprieve from the heat. A single garment, often made of linen, was all that could be afforded, and the poor often went without shoes. Food was scarce, and when the Nile's floodwaters didn't cooperate, the harvests failed. There were seasons of famine when families went without food for days, living off what little they could scrounge. When locusts invaded, entire fields could be stripped bare in a matter of hours. The tiny grains of wheat and barley you'd hoped to harvest were gone, and with them, your chances for survival. You did what you had to, praying to the gods, hoping that somehow the situation would improve. But it didn't always improve. In times of famine, the rich could often weather the storm, while the poor were left to fend for themselves. The wealthy could buy food from the state's granaries, but for those without resources, it was a different story. People began to sell themselves into servitude just to survive. For the peasant, life was precarious. No matter how hard you worked, you were never truly safe. A bad flood, an invasion of locusts, or a failing harvest could wipe everything out in an instant. And yet, even with the constant threat of hunger and hardship, the Egyptians persisted. They continued to work the land, continued to toil under the sweltering sun, and continue to build the monuments that would immortalize their rulers. But for those who survived, the toll was steep. The labor was back-breaking, the work never-ending, and the rewards were few. You, the humble peasant, lived not for yourself, but for the state, for the gods, and for the pharaoh. Your life was not your own. It was dictated by the forces of nature, the demands of the state, and the whims of the ruler. If you were fortunate enough to survive the grueling work and the harsh conditions, you might live to see another year. But for many, the weight of the labor and the never-ending struggle would eventually take its toll. Few made it past the age of 30, and the injuries sustained from years of back-breaking labor were often irreversible. Even those who survived the harsh conditions found themselves crippled by arthritis, broken bones, and internal injuries. But the hardships of life were not confined to the fields. They also extended to the homes of the common people. Malnutrition was rampant, especially among children. The food that could be grown was often insufficient to sustain a growing population, and the limited variety left many with weakened immune systems. The diseases that spread through the crowded and unsanitary villages were deadly. Even a small infection could quickly become life-threatening in a world without antibiotics or modern medical care. Still, even in the face of these hardships, you clung to your faith. The gods were always present, and their protection was something that gave you hope. The Nile, despite its destructive power, was also a source of life. The pharaohs, though they lived in luxury, were believed to be divine, and their rule was considered a reflection of the gods' will. If you could survive the floods, the famine, the disease, and the harsh labor, then you could hope for a better life in the afterlife. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was a central part of their belief system, and they saw it as the ultimate reward for enduring the hardships of this life. But as you toil under the unforgiving sun, the question lingers in your mind: is it worth it? Is the reward in the afterlife worth the suffering you endure in life? For most Egyptians, it was a question they had no choice but to accept. The hardships of life were inevitable, but the promise of immortality in the afterlife was what kept them going. In the end, it was the belief in something greater than themselves that allowed them to persevere. But that belief came at a cost, and that cost was the lives of the laborers who built the monumental civilization that Egypt would become. You trudge back to the field, the sun's intensity mercilessly bearing down on you. Each step a reminder of the task ahead. The labor is endless, the days are long, and yet you never get used to it. The Nile, for all its promises of abundance, is as unpredictable as life itself. The floods may be too much or too little, leaving your fate to chance. The ground beneath your feet is both a source of life and death. In your world, the river is both a blessing and a curse. You know this truth intimately, having lived it every day. For some, like you, survival is simply a matter of enduring the grind. The Pharaoh's grand ambitions loom over you. You don't see him, you don't hear him, but you feel the weight of his demands. His projects, monuments to his greatness, consume not only the land, but the lives of the people who work to create them. The great pyramids, those towering symbols of the Pharaoh's divine rule, were built on the backs of people like you. The numbers vary, but estimates say tens of thousands of laborers were conscripted into the Pharaoh's service, their lives offering no more value than the stones they carried. These workers were a necessary part of the machinery of Egypt. Yet in their toil, they were invisible, except for the scars they left in the sands of time. This was the grim reality for the laborers of Egypt. The Pharaoh, seated in his palace, removed from the suffering of the people, demanded that his grand ideas become reality. And so, the peasants, farmers, and slaves worked tirelessly to meet those demands. The Great Pyramid of Giza is perhaps the most iconic of these structures, but there were many others. Temples, obelisks, and monuments to the gods were all part of the royal agenda, each one a testament to the pharaoh's desire for immortality. But for you, the monument is just another reminder of how small you are in the grand scheme of things. The stones you carry may one day form part of a lasting wonder of the world. But for now, they are just a burden you bear to feed your family. You are not building for yourself. You are building for a ruler who will never know your name, never care about your family. The pharaoh's immortality is built on your sacrifice. Yet, as much as you resent the system that forces you into servitude, there is no escaping it. The work itself is grueling. It starts before dawn and continues until the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the distant hills. The heat is oppressive. The stones are massive, some weighing as much as 2.5 tons. The work is manual. There are no machines to aid you. You and your fellow laborers push, pull, and lift, relying on the strength of your hands and backs. You've lost count of the times you've seen people collapse from exhaustion, only to be replaced by others. Some die in accidents, crushed by falling blocks or trapped in the tunnels they've dug. Others simply fall victim to the relentless demands of the work: heat stroke, malnutrition, and disease. Yet there is no time to mourn. There is no time to rest. The Pharaoh demands results, and results are what the people must provide. The laborers, regardless of their age or health, are expected to continue working until they can no longer move. The final resting places of these workers, many of whom were buried near the pyramids they built, reveal the toll this work took on their bodies. Skeletons show signs of severe arthritis, broken bones, and other injuries caused by the long hours of back-breaking labor. It is a sobering reminder that these people were no different from you. They too struggled and suffered in the hope of providing for their families. In the world of ancient Egypt, there was little room for mercy. A mistake on the worksite could mean death. A worker could be struck by a falling block, crushed beneath a stone, or trapped in a collapsed tunnel. The taskmasters, ensuring the Pharaoh's will was carried out, wielded whips to keep the laborers in line. There was little regard for life, just the relentless push to complete the monuments that would ensure the Pharaoh's legacy. The worst part of it all is that the monuments being built weren't even for you. They weren't for the people who made them a reality. The pyramids were designed to ensure the Pharaoh's continued rule in the afterlife. The great works were meant to house the body of the Pharaoh, protecting it from the ravages of time. These monumental constructions were not built for the people, but for the gods and the pharaohs who would live on forever. Theirs was a life of glory, while the common people like you remained nameless, faceless laborers. But even as you toil, there's a small flicker of hope, a hope that one day the Pharaoh's demands will cease, that someday your hard work will bear fruit. Perhaps it will come with the change of the seasons. Perhaps it will come when you've worked your last day in the sun. But for now, you push forward, pulling the heavy stones and lifting the burdens that weigh you down. You are a part of something greater than yourself. And yet, you know that, like the many others who came before you, you will likely remain forgotten. When the Pharaoh's tomb is sealed and the pyramids stand tall in the desert, the laborers, the ones who built them, will be left behind. Their names will be lost to time. Their lives will be reduced to mere statistics in a historical record. Their bodies unremembered in the vast sands of Egypt. As you walk back to your humble dwelling at night, your body sore from the labor, you can't help but wonder if this life is all there is. The cycle is endless. Work, eat, sleep, and wake up to do it all over again. The Pharaoh's dreams will live forever, but your own will be forgotten. But even in the face of this crushing reality, you press on, because that's what life is. Endless toil, struggles, sacrifices. The Pharaoh's grand visions may be all-consuming, but in the end, they are not what define you. It's the small acts of resilience, the quiet determination to survive, that are what truly matter. The pharaohs may have built their great monuments, but it is the workers, like you, who will ensure that Egypt's legacy endures through their sacrifice, their sweat, and their endless perseverance. The pharaohs' monuments may rise high into the sky, but it is the people who lived beneath them who will forever be a part of Egypt's story. In the shadow of the pyramids, their legacy lives on. You sit beneath the harsh Egyptian sun, the weight of your day's work hanging heavy on your shoulders. The sand sticks to your sweat-covered skin, and the heat radiates from the ground beneath you. It's a fleeting moment of rest, but even this small respite is precious, for you know how quickly the moment will end. The pharaoh's demands are relentless. They do not care for your exhaustion, your pain, or your loss. They are only concerned with the completion of their monuments, their temples, their tombs. Yet here you are, just another laborer in the grand design of Egypt's legacy. Life for you, and for so many others, is an endless cycle. The flood waters of the Nile, which once seemed like a blessing, now feel like a constant reminder of how little control you have over your own life. Each year, you rely on the river to nourish your fields, to provide food for your family. But it is never guaranteed. You have seen the crops wither, seen the fields turn to dust. And in these moments of hardship, you are left to face the consequences alone. The pharaoh's life continues, filled with lavish banquets and endless leisure, while you work from sunup to sundown, with little more than bread and beer to sustain you. The social hierarchy in Egypt is brutal, a rigid system that places you and those like you at the very bottom. The pharaoh, the living god, sits at the top of this pyramid, surrounded by nobles and priests who control every aspect of life. Beneath them are the scribes and artisans, the workers who carry out the commands of the elite. But it is you, the peasants, the farmers, the laborers, who make Egypt's greatness possible. Yet you are given nothing in return for your efforts except a meager existence. And then there are the slaves, the lowest of the low. Many are prisoners of war, captured from lands far and wide. Others sold into bondage by debtors. They work without rest, without reprieve. Their lives are defined by their subjugation. For them, there is no escape. The pharaoh commands, and they obey. The cruel taskmasters see to it that the slaves perform their duties without question, without hesitation. Their work is grueling, their conditions unimaginable. But the ones who truly suffer are the ones who never see the light of day, those who live in the shadow of the pharaoh's pyramid. The slaves, the peasants, the workers, no matter how much they toil, how much they sacrifice, they are seen as little more than tools in the hands of their rulers. The pharaoh's monument stands as a testament to his grandeur, but beneath the surface lies the suffering of those who built it, those who bled for it. As you walk back to your modest home, exhausted, you are left with little but your thoughts. There is no time for rest, no time for dreams. The next day will bring more work, more labor. The pharaoh's plans are endless, and they require the sacrifice of countless lives. Yet, for all the suffering, there is a strange sense of pride in your heart. You are part of something larger than yourself, part of a civilization that has endured for thousands of years. You think of the monuments that will rise, tall and proud against the desert landscape. The pharaohs may be long gone, but their legacy will live on through these monuments. They will stand as symbols of power, of strength, of the divine rule of the pharaohs. Yet they are also reminders of the cost, the price paid by those who were forced to build them. The laborers, the slaves, the peasants, all of them will be forgotten, their names lost to history, but their work will endure, immortalized in stone. You look out over the Nile, the river that has shaped this land, and you wonder how much longer it will be before the pharaoh's demands swallow you whole. Will you be able to endure this life? Will your children inherit the same fate? Or will they rise above it, escape the grip of the pharaoh's empire? The sun begins to set, casting long shadows over the fields. The heat slowly begins to fade, but the weight of the day lingers. As you settle down for a few hours of rest, your body aching from the day's labor, you can't help but feel the quiet stirrings of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, your hard work will not be in vain. Perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, you will leave a mark on Egypt that will never be forgotten. But for now, all you can do is rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring more of the same. The river will rise, the pharaoh will command, and you will toil. It is the life of a laborer, the life of a servant, the life of a peasant, and it is the only life you know. The sun rises again, and with it comes the relentless heat that makes every muscle in your body ache before you even begin the day's work. The same harsh sun beats down on the pharaoh, the priests, and the nobles in their grand palaces. Yet there is a stark difference between you and them. They enjoy the fruits of your labor, while you bear the weight of the world's demands with little relief. You are a cog in the massive machine that is Egypt, a machine built on the backs of the many for the glory of the few. And so, you wake up each day to face the same unyielding task, carrying stones, digging canals, planting crops, and hoping that you or your children might one day be granted a different fate. But that hope is as distant as the horizon. The pharaoh's rule is absolute, and it is unwavering. His decisions shape the course of your life, and whether you rise or fall depends on the whims of the river, the harvest, and the pharaoh's demands. You, the laborer, the peasant, the slave, none of you have control over your destiny. You are tied to the land, to the seasons, to the river's flood cycle. It is a world of extremes, one that can either lift you to prosperity or crush you under the weight of its expectations. Today, as you stand at the edge of the Nile, you watch the water flow, the same water that sustains you and threatens to destroy you. The river, in its immense power, dictates your survival. Its annual flooding is both a gift and a curse. When it floods too much, it can drown villages, wipe out crops, and leave you with nothing but the muddy remnants of your labor. When it floods too little, the land becomes barren, and famine looms large on the horizon. And so, you pray. You pray to the gods, to the river spirit, to the Pharaoh, hoping that the floods will be kind this year. But even in these desperate prayers, there's a strange sense of resignation. You know that, in the end, the Pharaoh's will is what truly matters. His monuments, his tombs, his temples, all of them are built for his glory. You are just a tool in his vision, a laborer who exists to serve the gods and the kings. And so, you march forward, your steps heavy with the knowledge that your life is not your own. You are working not for yourself, but for something that will outlive you. As the day continues, you toil under the blazing sun, lifting blocks, digging trenches, and watching your sweat mix with the dust of the desert. You are part of something vast and eternal, a civilization that has lasted for thousands of years. But as the years pass, you wonder, how much of this will truly endure? The monuments may last, but the people who built them, who carried the stones and laid the bricks, will be forgotten. Your life and the lives of so many others will never be remembered. Yet you press on, because what else can you do? You think of your family. Your children are growing up in the same world, a world that seems to offer them nothing but hard work and hardship. Will they have a different life? Or will they too be trapped by the same cycle? The thought of their future weighs heavily on you. You have no illusions about the world they will inherit. The Pharaoh's rule is unyielding, and the expectations of the gods are absolute. Yet, even in the face of this oppressive system, you hold on to a fragile hope that somehow things will change. Perhaps one day, there will be a way to break free of this cycle. The thought of their future weighs heavily on you. You have no illusions about the world they will inherit. The Pharaoh's rule is unyielding, and the expectations of the gods are absolute. Yet, even in the face of this oppressive system, you hold onto a fragile hope that somehow things will change. Perhaps one day, there will be a way to break free of this cycle. Perhaps your children will find a path that leads beyond the fields, beyond the labor, beyond the stones. But as you look around, you know that this hope is more a dream than a reality. The system is too deeply ingrained, too powerful. The Pharaoh's will is law, and those who dare to challenge it are crushed beneath its weight. And so, you carry on. You lift the stones, you dig the trenches, you plant the seeds. The river flows, the sun sets, and the cycle begins anew. But in the quiet moments, as the sun dips below the horizon and the cool desert air begins to settle in, you can almost feel the weight of your ancestors, the workers, the peasants, the slaves, who built this great civilization. You are part of a long chain that stretches back through the centuries, and even as you toil in obscurity, you are connected to something much larger than yourself. It is a humbling thought, a thought that fills you with both awe and sorrow. For in the end, you will likely never see the fruits of your labor, never receive the recognition you deserve. But your work, your sweat, your sacrifice, it will live on. And so, as the stars twinkle in the night sky above, you rest, knowing that tomorrow you will rise again to face another day in the never-ending cycle. The Pharaoh's glory will continue, and you will continue to serve, as your ancestors did before you. You are but a small part of a much larger story, a story that spans millennia, built on the sacrifices of countless souls who gave everything for the grandeur of a civilization that will outlast them all. As the moon rises over the horizon, casting a pale light across the vast expanse of the Nile River, you wonder how much longer you can keep going. The work is endless, and the rewards are fleeting, if not non-existent. The Pharaoh's command echoes in your mind like the ringing of a bell, distant yet constant. You are one of the many, a laborer in a civilization that values its monuments over its people, a cog in a machine that churns day after day, year after year. Still, despite the oppressive system that dictates your every move, there is a part of you that cannot help but dream. But your dreams are fleeting. They fade away as quickly as they come, replaced by the cold reality of another day's labor. The sun rises again, the relentless heat forcing you to bend and toil once more. The Nile continues to flow, its waters carrying both life and death in equal measure. And you? You continue to labor, for you know that, for the most part, you have no other choice. You're not alone, though. Around you, there are others, just as weary, just as resigned. The workers, the peasants, the slaves. Each of them plays their part in the grand narrative of Egypt's glory. Some of them are skilled artisans, some are farmers, some are soldiers. Each has their role, and each is bound to the system in ways they cannot escape. Some may even find small joys in their work, in the companionship of their fellow laborers, or in the rare moments of rest between tasks. But for the most part, they too are caught in the cycle, their lives shaped by the same forces that shape yours. The Pharaoh's whims dictate the lives of thousands, if not millions. And you? You follow orders, whether you understand them or not, whether you agree with them or not. You are bound by duty, bound by tradition, bound by a system that has been in place for as long as you can remember. There is little room for rebellion, little space for defiance. To step out of line is to invite ruin, and few have the courage or the means to challenge the Pharaoh's rule. Yet, deep down, you cannot help but wonder what it would be like if things were different. What if the Pharaoh were not the absolute ruler? What if the gods were not so all-consuming in their demands? What if you, the common people, could live in peace, without fear of the ever-watchful eye of the Pharaoh or the gods? What if there were no pyramids, no tombs, no monuments that required the labor and lives of so many just to appease the gods and ensure the Pharaoh's immortality? The thought is a fleeting one, of course. It fades as quickly as it comes. For now, the work continues. You lift the stones, you dig the canals, you plant the crops, and as you toil, you cannot help but wonder how much longer this can go on. How many more generations will be born into this life, born into servitude, born into a system that values the Pharaoh's glory over the lives of its people? As the day wears on and the sun beats down on you once more, you reflect on the Pharaoh's monuments, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the temples, the tombs. These towering structures, These monuments to the pharaohs will stand long after you are gone, long after your bones have turned to dust. And perhaps that is the greatest irony of all. The pharaohs live on, their legacy preserved in stone and gold, while those who built their monuments are forgotten, their names lost to history. But even in your forgetfulness, even in your toil and suffering, there is something enduring about your work. The pyramid you are building, the temples you are constructing, the tombs you are digging. They will stand as a testament to the labor of countless people, each one a nameless worker who gave their blood, their sweat, their tears to create something that will outlive them. And perhaps that is the only comfort you can find in this life. The pharaoh's glory will fade eventually, just as all things fade. But the work of the laborers, the peasants, the slaves, will endure in the very stones and bricks they have placed, in the very monuments they have built. So, you rise again the next day, lifting your heavy burden once more. The Nile flows, the pharaoh commands, and you continue your labor. There is little choice after all. You are part of something larger than yourself, a piece of the grand design that will live on long after you are gone. As you stand at the edge of the Nile once again, the sun blazes overhead, casting long shadows that stretch across the river's surface. You wipe the sweat from your brow and take a moment to breathe, the heat pressing down on you like an unrelenting weight. The water before you, shimmering under the midday sun, is both your lifeline and your enemy. It is the river that nourishes the crops, that feeds the people, that sustains Egypt's power. Yet, it is also the river that can bring destruction, washing away entire villages in an instant. The delicate balance between life and death, prosperity and famine, is held in the hands of the pharaohs and their relationship with this great river. And you, like so many others, are caught in its flow. You think back to the stories you've heard, the legends of the pharaohs who controlled the Nile, who commanded the waters to rise and fall at their will. In many ways, these tales are woven into the very fabric of Egypt's identity. The pharaoh is not just a king, he is a god, a living deity whose power extends over the land, the people, and even the river itself. The ancient Egyptians believed that the pharaohs were divinely chosen to maintain the balance of the cosmos, to ensure that the world remained in harmony. The Nile was at the heart of this balance, and the pharaoh was its steward. When the pharaoh's will was in line with the gods, the river would flood just right, providing abundant harvests. When the pharaoh faltered, when the gods grew displeased, the river could turn on them, bringing famine, flooding, and death. You can't help but feel the weight of this belief on your shoulders. Your life is determined by the cycles of the Nile, the whims of the pharaoh, and the ever-present threat of famine. But even as the world around you spins on this axis of fear and uncertainty, there is something oddly comforting about it. It is a system that, for all its harshness, has endured for millennia. It has been in place for as long as anyone can remember, passed down through generations, and it is not likely to change anytime soon. And yet, there is a part of you that wonders. You have seen the suffering, the toil, the hunger that is so common in your world. You have witnessed the bodies of the fallen, peasants who die of exhaustion, slaves who perish under the weight of their work, children who succumb to disease. You wonder if it is truly worth it. This endless cycle of life and death, this constant struggle to survive under the pharaoh's rule. You wonder if there is more to life than the work, the labor, the endless cycle of planting and harvesting, building and dying. But such thoughts are dangerous. To question the pharaoh, to question the gods, is to invite disaster. There is no room for rebellion, no space for dissent. The consequences of defiance are swift and brutal, a harsh reminder of the power that the pharaohs hold over you. The system is too deeply entrenched, too powerful. You are a part of it, whether you like it or not. And so, you push these thoughts aside, burying them deep within yourself, as you have learned to do over the years. It is not your place to question. It is only your place to serve. As the sun begins to set, you return to your village, the heat of the day finally beginning to ease. The cool evening air brings a sense of relief. But even as you rest, your mind remains restless. You cannot escape the feeling that somehow you are trapped by the river, trapped by the pharaoh, trapped by the very land you are bound to. The life you lead is one of struggle, of endless work with no reward beyond the promise of another day. And yet, there is something deeply human in this struggle. There is a dignity in the labor, a sense of purpose in the simple act of survival. Your children, too, will one day toil in the fields, dig the canals, and build the monuments that will endure long after their own bodies are dust. It is a legacy that stretches back for thousands of years. And though it is filled with hardship, it is also filled with pride. The pyramids, the tombs, the temples, they are all a testament to the sweat and blood of people like you. People who gave everything for the glory of the pharaohs, for the gods, for Egypt. But even as you reflect on the weight of this legacy, there is something else. A quiet thought that lingers in the back of your mind. Perhaps it is the thought that just once you could escape. Escape the endless toil. Escape the grip of the pharaoh. Escape the cycle that binds you to this land. Perhaps one day, your children will find a way to break free, to live without the burden of the pharaoh's demands. But for now, you continue. The river flows, the pharaoh commands, and you are bound to both. It is a life that has been handed down through the generations, a life that you will pass on to your children. The struggle continues, and though it may never end, it is the only life you know. As the years pass, the oppressive sun of Egypt seems to burn more fiercely, and your back continues to ache from the unyielding labor. You stand at the water's edge again, watching the vast expanse of the Nile before you. Its waters calm, serene even. But beneath the surface, the current is always shifting, always moving. It feels like a mirror to your own life. A calm exterior, hiding the constant churn of challenges beneath. The pharaoh's demands never let up, and neither do the needs of the land. The floods come and go, always unpredictable, and yet your life remains on the same cycle. Labor, toil, struggle. There is no room for rebellion, no room for questioning the order of things. The pharaoh's monuments rise like gods before you, towering over the landscape as a constant reminder of Egypt's greatness. The pyramids stand proudly in the distance, their massive stones catching the fading light of the sun, their sharp edges cutting into the sky, like a testament to a civilization that has withstood the test of time. But you know, as you walk past them each day, that these towering structures were built on the backs of countless laborers like you. The pharaohs may live in opulent palaces, their every need attended to, but their monuments, those monuments, were not built by them. They were built by the men and women who lived in the shadow of the grand structures, the workers who sacrificed their bodies and their lives so that the pharaoh's name could live forever in stone. As you pass the village where you were born, memories flood your mind. The streets have barely changed. The same humble mud brick houses stand lined up beside one another, as they always have. The smell of bread baking in the communal ovens fills the air. The sound of children playing in the dirt echoes down the narrow alleyways. It's a comforting sound, and yet it reminds you of how little has changed since you were a child. You were born into this life, and it's the same life you now live as an adult. Your children, too, will carry on the same cycle. But for the first time in your life, you feel a gnawing sense of frustration. Your heart aches as you think of your children, and you wonder if they too will live their lives in the shadow of the pharaoh's monuments. Will they, like you, spend their days toiling under the harsh sun, building something that will never be theirs? Will they have the same dreams of freedom that you once had, only to have those dreams crushed by the harsh reality of a system they have no power to change? You think of the pharaohs again. They too are bound by their positions. The gods may have granted them divine power, but they too live with the weight of expectations that threaten to crush them. The pharaohs must maintain the illusion of control, the illusion of power. They must project an image of invincibility, even though the cracks in their rule are beginning to show. You have heard whispers of unrest, murmurs from the peasants who are growing more disillusioned with their lot. The pharaohs may not yet feel the threat of rebellion, but it is there, just beneath the surface, like the river, flowing quietly, waiting for the moment to break through. But rebellion is a dangerous thought. It is a thought that can cost you everything. There are always whispers of people who have dared to stand up against the pharaoh, to speak out, to demand change. And those whispers always end in silence. Those who rebel are quickly silenced, punished, imprisoned, executed. The pharaohs do not tolerate dissent. They do not tolerate the voices of those who challenge their divine right. The system that has held Egypt together for thousands of years is built on the premise of absolute control. You, the people, are meant to serve the pharaohs. You are meant to labor, to toil, to build their monuments, to worship their gods. And if you step out of line, there are consequences. So, you keep your head down. You continue with your work. The cycle of life continues, just as it always has. The sun rises, the Nile floods, the pharaoh commands, and you, the laborers, the peasants, the slaves, you continue to work. You continue to live in the shadow of the pharaoh's glory. And you wonder, as you trudge back to your small home after another long day of labor, if this will ever change. If your children will ever be free of the weight of Egypt's glory. If they will ever have the chance to live a life not dictated by the pharaoh, not defined by the monuments they have to build for the gods. And yet, despite the weight of these thoughts, there is still something that keeps you going. It is the faint hope that one day things might change. It is the knowledge that, despite the hardships, the toil, the unrelenting demands of the pharaoh, there is still a small spark within you, a spark of resistance, a spark of hope a spark of life. It is the knowledge that, though you may never break free from the cycle, you can still find meaning in the struggle. And in that, you find a kind of peace, a kind of resolve that allows you to face another day, another long stretch of endless work. But for now, as the stars begin to appear in the sky and the soft evening breeze cools your skin, you simply close your eyes and let the moment wash over you. The pharaohs may rule Egypt, but for this moment, the river is yours. And in that stillness, you are free. The days are long, and the work never ceases. The sun rises earlier than you, and it sets later, as if the world itself is trying to squeeze every last ounce of energy from your body. The Nile, despite its deep history, is the same as it has always been: vast, mysterious, and capable of both destruction and renewal. It continues its endless course, just as your life continues, marching to the rhythm of the pharaoh's demands, the cyclical floods, and the shifting seasons. You've become accustomed to the grind. It is part of your daily existence now. But there are moments, fleeting and rare, when you stop and wonder, is this it? Is this all there is? The pharaoh's great monuments, the towering pyramids, the temples to gods you can never see, they are not yours. The jewels that glint in the royal treasury, the fine linen worn by the nobility, the palaces adorned with gold, these are not your world. You are a part of something much larger, yes, but you remain a small cog in an endless machine. You toil away, making sure the Nile's crops grow, making sure the monuments rise, making sure the pharaoh's divine will is carried out. But when you look at the pharaohs, you don't see gods. You see men. Men who, like you, are born, live, and die. Life on the banks of the Nile is harsh, especially for those like you, the ones who work the fields, haul the stones, and build the temples. The ancient Egyptians were keenly aware of their place in the great cycle of life. They were bound by their relationship to the gods, the pharaohs, and above all, the land. The gods were thought to control everything, from the river's flow to the harvest, to the prosperity of the kingdom. The pharaohs, as gods on earth, acted as intermediaries between the divine and the mortal. They were not only rulers, but also the stewards of Egypt's fate, keeping balance and order in the world. But there is a truth, you know, deep in your bones, even though you've never dared to voice it aloud. The pharaohs are not invincible. They are rulers, yes, but they are also men, fragile, mortal men, as susceptible to the ravages of time and fate as anyone else. Even the greatest pharaoh, the one whose name will live for eternity, will one day be swallowed by the sands, his body mummified and placed in a tomb, where it will eventually be looted, desecrated, forgotten. The pharaohs may sit atop the social pyramid, but their reigns are not eternal. Their monuments, for all their grandeur, are built on shifting foundations. The mighty Giza pyramids, for example, constructed by thousands of hands, raised up over decades of labor, are no longer the tallest structures in Egypt. They stand as a reminder of what was, rather than what is. The pharaoh's wealth and power are fleeting, and they are often paid for with the lives of those who build them. It is a heavy price to pay for something that will one day fade into history, just as your own name will eventually fade into obscurity. Still, there is comfort in the knowledge that even the pharaohs cannot escape the inevitable. They, too, must face death. They, too, must face the gods, just as you do. no matter how high they climb, they cannot transcend the fundamental truth of life, that all things, no matter how grand, must eventually come to an end. As the seasons shift and the Nile floods again, you return to your daily routine. The Pharaoh's demands are as unyielding as the river. The sun rises, and you rise with it, taking up your tools and following the same paths that have been trodden for centuries. You wonder, sometimes, if this is all there is, if there will ever be a change, a revolution, a break in the cycle. But deep down, you know the truth. Change comes slowly, if at all. The pharaohs are eternal in the eyes of their people, and the gods are always watching. The toil, the sweat, the exhaustion, it all continues. The laborers in the fields work through the day, the stonecutters work through the night, and you find yourself once again staring up at the monument that looms over the landscape, the monument that you and countless others are helping to build. There is something oddly humbling about it. This monument, like the Nile itself, will outlive you. It will stand long after your bones have returned to the earth, a testament to the work of those who built it. But for you, this work is all there is. It is all you have ever known. You try to find solace in the little things, the camaraderie of your fellow workers, the small joys of life that come in moments when the work pauses, the laughter of children, the smell of freshly baked bread, the quiet hum of the evening as the sun sets over the horizon. These fleeting moments are a reminder that life, despite its hardships, is still worth living. As the moon rises and the stars begin to dot the night sky, you sit by the banks of the Nile, taking a moment to rest. The sound of the river, the rustling of the reeds, the distant hum of the village. These sounds soothe you, reminding you that you are not alone in this struggle. There are others, just like you, who share the same burdens. You are part of something larger, something that stretches back thousands of years and will continue long after you are gone. It is not much, but it is enough. In the end, the pharaohs may rule Egypt, but it is the people, the workers, the laborers, the farmers, the families that keep the land alive. Your life may be harsh, but it is also filled with purpose. And perhaps that, more than anything else, is the greatest legacy you can leave. The knowledge that, for all the struggle, for all the hardship, you played your part in building something that will endure. The night is still, and the river murmurs its timeless song as you sit by the water's edge, lost in thought. Life in ancient Egypt is like this, full of contradictions. The harshness of the day fades into the cool quiet of the evening, and for a brief moment, you can feel a sense of peace settle over you. The stars above are a blanket of twinkling lights, a reminder that even in the harshest of lives, there is something beautiful in the world. The pharaohs may sit atop the social pyramid, but they too are subject to the same universal truth, the inevitability of change. And you wonder, as you gaze at the eternal sky, whether that change will ever come for you. The cycle of life continues, relentless in its march. The Nile floods each year, bringing both destruction and renewal. You've seen the damage firsthand, crops destroyed, homes swept away in the water's raging path. The pharaohs may send for aid, but it is the common people who feel the brunt of the flood's fury. And yet, each year, the floodwaters return, and with them, hope. You've learned to survive this precarious rhythm. You've learned to accept the flood as part of life, just as you've learned to accept the sunburn on your skin, the aching muscles in your back, and the dust that coats your throat. As a child, you were told stories about the pharaohs, how they were gods, untouchable, and all-powerful. But now that you've grown, you see them differently. They are rulers, yes, but they are also men. Men who face the same dangers as the rest of you. The pharaoh may be the living god, but even he cannot escape the whims of the Nile. His reign may be absolute, but his mortality is just as inevitable as your own. He too will one day be swept away by the sands of time. His name whispered only in stories told by the priests who honor his memory. There's a strange comfort in this thought. You are bound by the same cycle as the pharaohs, caught in the same web of labor, struggle, and survival. And yet, in this shared mortality, there is freedom. The pharaoh's power may seem vast, but it is only as long as the monuments he builds. The labor of his people, the sweat of their brows, the sacrifices of their bodies, these are the true foundations of Egypt's greatness. The pharaoh may give the orders, but it is the common folk who make his visions a reality. You've always known this, of course, but it is only now that you truly understand the weight of it. The pharaohs are not immortal. They are not beyond the reach of time. Their monuments, however, will stand for millennia, built on the backs of those like you who endure, who carry the weight of Egypt's greatness. You wonder sometimes what the future will hold. Will these monuments still stand when your children's children walk the earth? Will the pharaohs be remembered as gods, or will they too fade into obscurity, just as their monuments eventually will? As you stand and turn back toward the village, you notice the glow of light from the torches carried by the workers. The rhythm of life goes on, even in the darkest hours. You have work to do. There are fields to tend, bricks to haul, and taxes to be paid. But for a brief moment, you find solace in the quiet, in the stillness, and in the knowledge that you too are a part of something much larger than yourself. You are a part of Egypt. And though your life may not be gilded in gold, though you may never sit upon a throne or wear the finest linens, you are still a part of this land's legacy. You may toil in the shadow of the pharaohs, but it is your sweat, your labor, your life that sustains the kingdom. You are not invisible, though the world may not remember your name. In the end, the true beauty of Egypt lies not in the pharaoh's grandeur, but in the quiet resilience of the people who built it, those who worked the land, who raised their families, who lived and died beneath the shadow of the pyramids. And so, you continue your walk back to the village, the stars above your head and the river at your back. There will be another day tomorrow, another cycle of labor, another chance to build, to contribute, and to survive. You are not alone. There are thousands, millions, just like you, hidden behind the pharaoh's glistening walls, their names lost to history, but their hands shaping the world with every brick they lay, every seed they plant, every stone they carve. The first rays of sunlight break through the horizon, casting a warm glow over the vast land of Egypt. You wake to the sound of the river's steady flow, a familiar rhythm that has guided your life since birth. As the morning fog lifts from the Nile, you rise and stretch, the aches of the previous day still fresh in your body. The day will be long, the work unending. But for now, there's a brief moment of peace, a quiet interlude before the relentless demands of life resume. You grab your tools and head towards the fields. The land is fertile, nourished by the yearly floods of the Nile, but it is also capricious. The river is as unpredictable as the whims of the gods, bringing either abundance or devastation. The pharaoh may decree that crops should grow, but it is the hands of the laborers, like yours, that bring the harvest to fruition. There is no escaping the cycle. Every year the floodwaters come, and every year you pray they will recede in time to give you a chance at a good harvest. Life for most Egyptians is defined by this struggle. Year after year, hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. And while you toil away in the fields, others are working just as hard on the monumental projects that have come to define this great civilization. You can't help but think about the pyramids. They rise like mountains in the distance, a constant reminder of the pharaoh's power, his divine mandate to build and rule. You have heard stories of the pharaohs, how they live in opulent palaces, how their wealth and power seem endless. But you also know that this grandeur comes at a cost. The cost is you, the laborers, the farmers, the builders, those who live and die beneath the pharaoh's shadow. For all the majesty of the pyramids, they were built on the backs of those who never saw the wealth or luxury that the pharaohs enjoyed. It is a thought that lingers in your mind as you work, but it doesn't change anything. The work must go on. The pharaoh's vision must be fulfilled, and it is up to you to make that happen. As the day progresses, the sun climbs higher, and the heat becomes almost unbearable. You wipe the sweat from your brow and take a long drink from the water pouch at your side. It doesn't seem to matter how much you drink. The thirst always returns, relentless, like the cycle of work itself. You continue to labor, the repetitive motions of your hands pulling at the earth and planting seeds that may or may not survive the fickle Nile. The work is hard, but you are not alone. Around you, there are dozens, hundreds, even thousands of others, farmers, laborers, craftsmen, all working together to sustain the kingdom. It is a strange thing to be part of such a vast, powerful machine. On the one hand, you are just one person, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But on the other hand, you are everything. Without your hands, without your labor, none of this would be possible. The pharaoh may be the living god, but it is you who feeds the land, you who carries the stones, you who builds the monuments. You, along with the other workers, are the foundation of Egypt. As the afternoon heat sets in, you stop for a brief respite in the shade of a nearby palm tree. The sweat stings your eyes, and your muscles ache. But there is a sense of satisfaction in the work, even if you never see the fruits of your labor. You are part of something eternal, something that will outlast you. The pyramids, the temples, the statues, they will remain long after your bones have turned to dust, and in some small way, that gives you comfort. Your life may be hard, your body may be worn, but your contribution to Egypt's greatness will endure. You glance around at the other workers. Some are older, some are young, but all are united in their toil. There is a camaraderie here, an unspoken bond between those who work together, who share the same burdens. You all know that, no matter how hard the work gets, no matter how brutal the heat, or how harsh the pharaoh's demands, you will keep going. You have no choice. The river rises and falls, the seasons shift, but the work goes on. As the day wears on, you continue your labor, the sun sinking lower in the sky. The sweat dries on your brow, and your hands become calloused from the endless work. But there is no rest for the weary. The Pharaoh's demands are endless, and so too are the demands of the land. The Nile must be tamed, the crops must grow, and the monuments must rise. You work on, your body aching, your mind weary, but your spirit unbroken. By the time the sun sets, the day is over, and you return to your humble dwelling, exhausted but grateful for the rest. You lie down on the hard ground, the sounds of the river and the distant hum of the village, lulling you to sleep. Another day has passed, and tomorrow will bring the same challenges, the same struggles, but also the same sense of purpose. You are part of Egypt, and though your life may be short, your labor will echo through the ages, a testament to the resilience and strength of the human spirit. The cool night air settles over the village as you lie beneath a simple blanket, listening to the soft sounds of the desert. The wind rustles through the palm trees, and the distant murmur of the Nile provides a steady rhythm. It's hard to think of much else but the fatigue of the day, the endless work, the back-breaking labor, and the constant toll it takes on your body. But there is also a sense of quiet pride, a feeling that despite it all, you are contributing to something greater than yourself. As you close your eyes, the thought of the pharaohs lingers in your mind. They are gods, you've been told since childhood, the mighty rulers who command the land, who build the pyramids, who sit in palaces of unimaginable luxury. And yet, you've come to realize that these pharaohs are not so different from the rest of you. Their lives are defined by the same struggles and hardships, just on a grander scale. They too are at the mercy of the Nile, the seasons, and the endless demands of their reign. The pharaoh may be a god, but he is still human, and like all humans, he is bound by time. You've seen the pharaohs in their glory, their grand processions, their elaborate feasts, and their opulent palaces. But you've also seen the toll it takes, the pressure to maintain their power, to build monuments that will endure for eternity, to wage wars that will secure their kingdom. These are not lives of ease, but of constant struggle. Even the gods have their burdens to bear. The pharaohs live for the present, but they also live for the future, for the monuments they will leave behind, for the legacy they will create. And yet, you wonder, as you drift off to sleep, how many pharaohs have truly found peace in the afterlife? How many of them, buried beneath layers of gold and silk, are truly at rest? It is said that the pharaohs are gods, but the gods too must face the same trials as everyone else, the same struggle to maintain power, to protect their people, and to ensure their place in history. And in a way, you are no different. Your life may be smaller in scale, but it is still marked by the same struggles. You toil under the same sun, labor under the same demands, and live in the same land that has shaped Egypt for millennia. The pharaohs may sit in their palaces, but they are not immune to the same forces that govern your life. You are bound to the same river, the same seasons, and the same cycles of life and death. The Nile gives life, but it also takes away. The floods bring both abundance and destruction, and in the end, it is the laborers, the farmers, and the workers who bear the weight of it all. Your work is hard, but it is necessary. It is the foundation of Egypt's greatness, the sweat and blood that sustain the empire. And though you may never wear the fine linen or the glittering jewels of the pharaohs, you are just as essential to the kingdom's survival. Without your labor, the monuments would never rise, the fields would never flourish, and the pharaoh's reign would falter. You can't help but think about the legacy of the pharaohs. They are gods, but they are also men. They live and die just as you do, and their reigns are marked by the same struggles and sacrifices. They may command armies and build pyramids, but they are not immune to the passage of time. And when their reigns come to an end, they too will be buried beneath the sands, their names whispered only in the halls of the priests who honor their memory. But you're not worried about that now. For now, there is only the quiet peace of the night, the sound of the Nile, and the promise of another day. Tomorrow will bring its own struggles, its own burdens, and its own demands. But for tonight, you rest. You rest, knowing that, like the pharaohs, you are part of something larger. You are part of Egypt's story, and your labor, your sweat, and your endurance will live on long after you are gone. As we reach the end of our journey through the land of the pharaohs, let's take a moment to reflect on the great story we've just explored. The ancient Egyptians were a people of incredible ingenuity, creativity, and resilience. Their legacy still stands today, a testament to their ambition and determination. But as we peel away the layers of history, we also uncover a world marked by hardship, inequality, and struggle. The stunning monuments, golden treasures, and majestic temples we associate with ancient Egypt were built on the backs of countless laborers whose lives were often defined by toil, sacrifice, and unyielding endurance. The vast majority of Egyptians, whether they were farmers, craftsmen, or slaves, lived lives of constant labor and hardship. They were at the mercy of the unpredictable Nile, their livelihoods dependent on the annual flood that could either nourish their crops or destroy everything they had worked for. They endured the brutal heat of the desert sun, with little to protect them from its scorching rays. They worked in fields, quarries, and construction sites, often with inadequate food, poor living conditions, and minimal care for their physical well-being. Yet, despite all of this, they persevered, creating one of the most enduring civilizations the world has ever known. Behind the grandeur of the pyramids and the temples lay the stories of these nameless workers, the unsung heroes of ancient Egypt. These individuals, often forgotten by history, were the true builders of Egypt's greatness. Their names may never be known, but their contributions were vital. They shaped the very landscape of Egypt, turning a desert into a thriving civilization. They built the great pyramids that still stand today, and their sacrifices paved the way for Egypt to become one of the most influential civilizations in human history. As we reflect on the lives of the workers, we are reminded of the harsh realities they faced: the oppressive social hierarchy, the forced labor, the constant threat of starvation, disease, and death. These were the daily burdens of the average Egyptian. Even those at the top of society, like the pharaohs and their noble families, were not immune to the dangers and hardships of life. Disease, injury, and war took their toll on even the most powerful figures in ancient Egypt. The fact that Egypt's greatest pharaohs, such as Thutmose III and Ramses II, were also victims of the harsh conditions of their time, is a sobering reminder that no one, was safe from the brutality of ancient life. Yet, despite all of this suffering, the Egyptians found ways to create meaning, to endure, and to leave a lasting legacy. They were driven by a powerful belief in the afterlife, a conviction that life was not just about the struggles of the present, but also about the hope of a better existence in the next world. This belief gave them the strength to carry on, even in the face of overwhelming hardship. They built elaborate tombs filled with treasures and grave goods as a way to ensure a peaceful afterlife. The pyramids, with their towering grandeur, were not just monuments to the pharaohs. They were also symbols of the Egyptian belief in immortality, in the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. In the end, the greatest lesson we can take from the ancient Egyptians is one of resilience. Despite the brutality of their lives, despite the overwhelming challenges they faced, they managed to build a civilization that still captivates us to this day. Their monuments, their art, their culture, and their achievements are a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the will to survive, and the desire to leave a mark on the world. They were a people who endured, who fought for their place in history, and who left behind a legacy that continues to inspire us. So, as we bid farewell to the land of the pharaohs, let us remember the many nameless souls whose labor and sacrifice built the civilization that we still marvel at today. Let us honor their resilience, their determination, and their strength. And let us take a moment to appreciate the blessings we have in our own lives. For as we have seen, life is fragile and fleeting. The ancient Egyptians knew this better than anyone, but they also knew the power of hope, faith, and the human drive to create something greater than themselves. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine yourself once again standing at the edge of the Nile, watching the water flow past as it has for thousands of years. The sun has set. The stars are beginning to twinkle in the sky, and the ancient land is at peace. You are a part of that land now, a part of the eternal story of Egypt. And just like those who toiled long before you, you are a part of something greater than yourself. Now, take a slow, deep breath. Feel the weight of the day gently lift from your body as you sink into the warmth and comfort of your bed. The worries, the noise, and the chaos of the world fade away as you let the stillness of the night envelop you. Imagine the soft whispers of the Nile's waters, the calm breeze across the desert, and the quiet that filled the ancient Egyptian night. In this peaceful moment, allow yourself to feel connected to the timeless journey of humanity. You too are a part of that story, and just as the Egyptians left their mark on the world, so do you, in your own way. Let the serenity of the desert night, the silence of the pyramids, and the flow of the Nile guide you into a deep and restful sleep. As you close your eyes, know that you have witnessed a piece of history, and that piece will forever stay with you. You are bound by the same human spirit that once built the great monuments of Egypt, the same resilience that saw people through the toughest of times, and the same courage that carried them into the afterlife. Let go of your thoughts now. With every exhale, feel yourself becoming lighter, softer, more at ease. The day is done, and as the stars shine bright over ancient Egypt, you drift into a peaceful slumber, just as they did thousands of years ago.